Hello everyone, this is Ranger J 1999 from the Reality Skewed Gamers, and welcome to another lore video. We do these lore videos for new characters that are being introduced into the Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes game, or they're currently in the game, it doesn't really matter, or maybe they're a character that we want in the game. We can cover any of those. And these are basically an intro video for any of those people out there that are not familiar with the characters or the lore and want to learn a little bit about it and kind of whet their appetite to learn more. And some of these will be canon. Some will be EU, and sometimes it'll be a little bit of both. I'll kind of let you know a little bit of where we're kind of going with which side of the canon we're covering, or lore side of it, whether it's canon, whether it's expanded universe. I'll give you an insight of where it's going to be at. So, a couple things before we begin. These videos are done with more of a podcast feel, and it's just me having a little conversation with you. Also, any images that you see on the screen, if you as the content creator have a problem with us using the image, then all you need to do is reach out to us and we'll take corrective action. Also, I'm a human being. I will make mistakes, and if I do, feel free to let me know if I made any mistakes in the lore video in the comments below. I love constructive feedback, but if you're going to go the other way and not be constructive, then I'm just going to ignore you, delete your message, and move on. So just keep it constructive, but if I get something wrong or you don't like something, please let me know, and just be constructive. That's the most important thing. And with all that out of the way, let us talk about who we're going to be covering today. And of course, one of the lovelier ladies in Star Wars, in the mythos and lore. And of course, that is the one and only Queen of Naboo, Padme Amidala. And she's one of my favorites, and she, of course, was portrayed by the lovely and talented Natalie Portman, and she was in all three of the first prequel movies. And of course, you also know her as the Queen of Naboo, as the Senator of Naboo, and the wife of Anakin Skywalker, and the mother of Luke and Leia Skywalker. And let's get into a little bit of what we're going to be covering today. So if you've seen the movies, you know who this character is. If you don't, then I highly suggest you watch the prequels. You know, a lot of people have their position on the prequels, but if anything, it just introduces you to the character, and you got to get a little bit of insight from the movies. Now, for this lore video, I'm not going to cover the movies as much. When we get to the timeline of the movies, I'll give a little recap of what happens in there, so you can kind of follow chronologically what we're discussing. And then I highly suggest to go watch the movies. So there you go. But what I really want to cover with her is her beginnings before she was queen, what led up to her being the queen, and then in between events of episode 1 and 2, and then getting into some of the things that I found important with the Clone Wars. There's a ton of stuff about her in the Clone Wars and the Clone Wars series. I don't want to cover every little detail. Again, this is just an intro. If you want to know more, you can read more or watch the Clone Wars series and watch the movies. But this gives you an idea of just some of her characteristics and traits that made her one of the most beloved characters in Star Wars. So with that, let's get started, and let's talk a little bit about who was Padme Amidala. Now, first, let's kind of describe what she looks like. You can see on the image, it's an image of Natalie Portman. If you know who Natalie Portman looks like, you can look her up. But officially, she was listed in canon as having light skin, brown hair, brown eyes, and she stood about 1.5 meters tall, or roughly 5'10". And of course, she was born in the year 46 BBY on the planet of Naboo, and she died in the year 1919 BBY. And for those that don't know, BBY means Battle Before Yavin. Yavin is the center point in the Star Wars timeline, so there's before and after the Battle of Yavin for anything timeline related for Star Wars. So let's go to her beginning. She was born on the planet of Naboo, as we previously mentioned, and she was born to the parents Rui and Jobel Nabari. Nabarari, however you want to say that. So that made her name really Padme Nabarari. She didn't take on the name Amidala until she became queen. She kind of a title that they would pick a name to kind of honor the name of when they became queen. We'll get to how she became queen. At an early part of her life, when she was young, her mom and dad were from modest means, but her father had a lot of friends. One was a senator named Anaconda Thar, and he was a Rodian, and he was the senator from that area. And she loved him, and she used to call him Uncle Ono. Kind of got her started thinking about being into politics. It gets her mind when she was young, because her favorite uncle was a politician. When she was 7, she went on a a mission with her father to a planet called Shada Bit Boran, and it was really to help the population there to relocate after a disaster there, and they were helping with the relief efforts. And unfortunately, the effort was a failure, and the population couldn't really adapt to where they were relocated to, which was another home, another world, another home world. And it kind of set this thing in here that Amidala, it kind of instilled in her to really want to this belief that if she had to try, like the quote was 10,000 times to save one person, she would. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of who Padme was. She was very kind. She was very compassionate. She was strong-willed, and you kind of see that in her actions as we move forward. So after that, at an early age, she'd already been identified as a very just smart, intelligent, very gifted young girl, and she'd made it at this point. I think she's like 8 years old. She decided to devote her life to public service. So the first thing she did, she joined the apprentice legislator on Naboo, and she quickly rose in the ranks and became got the title of junior senatorial advisor. And she did this for a while, stayed in there, and then by the age of 12, she then moved to the legislative youth program. And then she met her first crush. She had a little love fling with this an older boy named Paulo Gemabi. They did fall in love. They had a little puppy love, but it didn't last long because Paulo didn't really want to stay in political life. He eventually became an artist. They kind of lost touch, but that was her first crush. And it was also at this time when she turned 12 that she had to start a 2-year mandatory role as supervisor of Theed. So kids in Naboo were very much required, for public service if they wanted to, and she was very much about public service. So we can see that. After that, so she's doing that for her 2 years. This leads to when she turns 14. When she turns 14, she's elected as the Queen of Naboo, and doesn't have a lot of time on her hands before what we now get into the events that lead to Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. She'd only been queen a short time when this happened, when the Trade Federation makes its move for the planet of Naboo, occupies Naboo, takes over the capital, actually imprison her. You see all this in Episode 1. She has escaped with the help of Qui-Gon, Jinn, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. They go to Coruscant, finds that the Senate is pretty much useless, and then she eventually goes back to the planet. You can see all this stuff happen. Two main events happen there that would have a profound impact on her. She was heralded for her courage and leadership in the dark times of the people of Naboo, for being there when they needed her the most, and she was on the forefront of the battle to liberate the city and the planet from the Trade Federation. But the loss of life of the soldiers and people that fought to free themselves from the occupation sat with her for a long time and kind of changed her mind on some things. And the loss of Qui-Gon Jinn. The loss of Qui-Gon Jinn really affected her more than anything, is this incredible Jedi gave his life for her people, and she never forgot about that. And after the Battle of Naboo, you can see everything in the movie, but after the events of Episode 1, everybody on Naboo, on the anniversary of the Day of Liberation, would have a memorial for those that had sacrificed and given their life, and they were celebrated. And every year on that, Padme would make sure to light an incense for the memory of Qui-Gon Jinn. So she never forgot about his sacrifice, and I thought that was kind of cool. She also helps with the recovery project with Naboo. Naboo's war-torn, so she helps with that and gets Naboo back on his feet. However, there was a little bit of a division on the planet Naboo, as the planet had always been about peace and not aggressive, not having an army. A compromise was made to have defensive weaponry placed on the planet to protect itself from an invasion, not so much to create an army, but to create a force that was able to better defend the planet from anything happening again, like the Trade Federation. It really divided the populace. It divided her and her captain, who was on the opposite side. She was actually in favor of adding a ion gun to the planet for defense. He was strictly against it. So it divided a lot of people on Naboo, including her parents. They were just horrified at the thought of those kind of weapons being on the planet. But it won out, and she thought it was better to have it than not. But typically, and you'll see, Padme was very much against war. She was about taking action, but all her actions were about trying to find peaceful solutions to things. She was all about She wasn't so much concerned about the war effort as she was after the war was started. You saw her really caring about refugees and trying to have diplomatic solutions to the problems that was facing the galaxy, and she worked exceptionally hard at that. So she does her 2 terms as queen, and she was so beloved and loved by the populace that there was a strong contingent of people on Naboo that wanted to make her have a 3rd term as queen, but she declined. However, when the new queen took over, she asked her to serve as a representative for Naboo in the Senate, and she accepted, always having that devotion to public service, and she became the senator for Naboo. And she kind of has some things that happen with her as a young senator. But really, nothing much to mention. You can go and read about anything. A couple things go on, but she visits Alderaan and some other things that go on. But there's nothing really you want to get into. If you want to read about it, you can. There's lots of sites that you can get lore and read about that kind of stuff. Then we get to events of Episode 2. So it's 10 years after Episode 1. Before Episode 2 kicks off, the big thing was that tensions between systems that were breaking off from the Republic, not calling them the Confederacy of the Trade Federation and other things. Confederacy is separatist states. Were kind of breaking off. More and more systems were being broken off. Of course, if you've seen any of my other lore videos, you know why that is. Go watch the Count Dooku video. Nobody really knew why. They just said that the Republic was corrupt and all these other things. Really, they were being manipulated by both sides, by Palpatine and Dooku. However, they didn't know that at the time. Now, when this started happening, the Republic got really antsy. And so a vote was in the Senate to declare war and give powers for war, to create an army and have the Republic ready in case it came to war. Padme, Senator Organa, and some of the others were vehemently against this act. And because of that, she became a target. And that leads to Episode 2. When you see her land on the planet, that's when you see all the events transpire. And then we get into Episode 2. And if you want to watch Episode 2, you can. You can see all the stuff that Padme does there. The big thing that happens in Episode 2, her relationship with Anakin, she hasn't seen him in 10 years. They meet again. Things happen. They fall in love. Things go on to where they eventually, by the end of Episode 2, at the start of the Clone Wars, they secretly get married on the planet Naboo. And she becomes Anakin Skywalker's wife. Now, Anakin and Padme, from Episode 1, they had known each other, but then they separated. She went on to do her queen. He became a Jedi. She became and finished out her term as queen, became a senator. They hadn't seen each other for 10 years, but the love was there, and they got married secretly. Because Anakin was not supposed to be married. He was a Jedi, but Padme loved him too much, that she, even though it was in secret, she wanted to be married, and they were. And this leads to the Clone Wars. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on with the Clone Wars. I'm not going to cover all of it. If you want to watch every single thing that Padme does in the Clone Wars, then please go watch the Clone Wars series. I'm just going to cover some of the key events that I think are really cool about some of the things she does, especially in the beginning, and a couple other things. And if you really want to get into the details of stuff, there's a lot there. There's so much with her in the Clone Wars. But I'm going to hit on a couple highlights for me, and then if you want to know more, just go look it up yourself. So the first thing that happened right after the Clone Wars starts is that the Republic is trying to negotiate with the Hutt cartel. However, Jabba the Hutt is not wanting to have anything to do with that, because he thinks his son has been kidnapped by Anakin Skywalker. Well, Padme steps in and no, she can't talk to Jabba, so he talks to his uncle Zero, Ziro, and so she's trying to have a meeting. She starts talking with him, kind of puts her off. She sneaks in to try to see him and overhears a conversation. Zero had been the one to kidnap the child, Jabba's son, and was working with Dooku, conspiring with the Separatists. Now, Padme overhears this conversation, and she gets captured, and then she's placed in the dungeon. However, she uses her wit and her mind to basically convince some of the droids there to work with her. She escapes. She eventually finds Zero, puts him at gunpoint, and basically turns him over and lets Jabba know the deal. And because of that, Jabba signs a treaty with the Republic and the Hutt cartel to support them. So that was kind of a big deal. Right after that, we get to another key battle, and the next thing she does is she's always on the go, always trying to resolve things. So from there, she was sent by Chancellor Palpatine to try to negotiate with the Banking Clan about withdrawing from the war. If you've seen the movie, you know the Banking Clan had joined with the Separatists. However, it was not what she thought it was. She was with in her ship along with an escort with Anakin and Kenobi, and they go to the rendezvous point and to where they're supposed to meet the envoy. However, it turns out it's a trap. Separatists show up, especially the Malevolence, and immediately locks her ship in a tractor beam. Now, Anakin and Kenobi try to free her initially, and she tells them to keep firing to destroy the ship, but they stop firing because it puts her in danger. So she gets a tractor beam. They pull her into the hangar. When she gets in the hangar, she knows she's going to get boarded, so she sets explosives in the ship and waits till the droids go on there, one of them being General Grievous. General Grievous goes on. She sets off the charges as she escapes, thinking that she's going to take out General Grievous. The explosion does not kill him, and so she's now on the Malevolence trying to get out. She contacts Anakin and Kenobi. They come over to the ship now. They rescue her. Some stuff happens, but basically they're able to not only escape, but they send the ship into a moon. They're able to not only take over the navigation, but they basically run around take control of the ship, so much so that they cause it to crash land into one of the moons in the nearby system, and they get out of there and they escape. And that was when I thought that was pretty cool. It kind of shows you that even in tough circumstances, that she was pretty amazing at doing what she did. After that, you know, you see this kind of what Padme's trying to accomplish. It's always about peace. It's always about negotiating. It's always about trying to find compromise and to end the war as quickly as possible. And you see that she was an ambassador for peace, and she just worked diligently to try to end the war as quickly as possible. So after that, the next one I really want to cover is Mandalore. This is a big event for her. Now, previously she had a near-death incident on Queta Neimoidia, and she had taken a break, and she got interested in what was going on with Mandalore, which was a key planet and system of government that had remained neutral up to this point. You know, we're now further along in the Clone Wars, and the government had remained neutral. However, there were hardliners there that wanted to go to war, and they wanted to join the Separatists. Now, this got exacerbated by an assassination attempt on the Duchess Satine Kryze. From this, she contacted Padme. Padme had informed her that because the Senate was going to had voted to send an occupational force to Mandalore with everything that was going on. There was some more stuff going on, but basically the Senate had been tricked because the Prime Minister, they had received a holo message from the Prime Minister saying that, you know, they needed help and all this stuff was happening, and it turned out that it had been changed from the hardliners. They kind of changed it through some stuff that happens. Padme gets the correct message, and as they vote for the final vote for to send the forces, Padme plays the message in front of the Senate, in front of Palpatine, and they recline the vote, and they leave Mandalore neutral. And so you can kind of see that this is another Clone Wars episode. There's more to it, but you can kind of watch it. After that, she's still involved with Mandalore. So she then headed to Mandalore because not only was there the hardliners there, but there was also a big economic crisis going on. Trade was not coming in. There was a lot of disruption in trade, and due to the shortage of goods caused by the war, it had created an economic crisis. And because of that, smuggling had become really pronounced. And this was something that Padme was trying to take care of, but she was really hampered. She's trying to solve the problems, but the Mandalorians, again, were initially, and she couldn't figure out why, you'll learn here in a sec why, but they weren't officially accepting the Republic's help and aid in things, so it made it hard for her to get resources to where they needed to be, and you'll see why. Now, the smuggling was rampant, and it became to a point that a school of kids got poisoned because of some really bad tea that had been brought to the school, and so Padme and the Duchess, who she's now friended, go investigate. They find out it's a tea, and then they go and look for where this tea came from. They eventually find it from a clan, from the smuggling operations from the Muga, and they knew that there was another shipment on the way. And so, with the help of local law enforcement, who was really not wanting to help at the moment until they saw the proof, did a raid. They stopped the shipment, got the people that were doing it, and the Duchess burned the warehouse down, which earned the admiration of the Duchess forever for what Padme did. Because in that fight, one of the head law enforcement guy gets shot. Padme takes out to the smugglers. She's a badass combatant. You can see that she's not afraid to pick up a blaster and do what she needs to do, and she's really, really good in combat. She's not a slouch, and she's not afraid to fight. So that happens. So then they go and talk to the Prime Minister about this. And through their conversation, this smuggling's getting rampant. We got to do something about it. These kids are getting sick, yada, yada, yada. The Prime Minister kind of says, yeah, it's happening because there's a lot of corruption on Mandalore, and that he's going to try to do something about that. And so they have this conversation, and that he would start investigations and see what he could do. With that, Padme can't really do anything else. She stays in touch with the Duchess, and the Duchess kind of lets you know that, as a side thing, that the Royal Academy could use an agent from the Jedi. So she lets her know that she'll let Grandmaster know what's going on. And that leads to some other stuff. The next big event that I want to cover is the assassination attempt. There's quite a lot for her, but this one was pretty significant, and it's in the Clone Wars. This one that really stood out to me as well is that the next event is on Alderaan. Now, Padme had gone there because one of the things, remember, she's all about trying to help people that are suffering from the war. The refugee problem at this point had gotten really bad. The war at its height was causing just devastation throughout the galaxy. And so she was trying to do something along with Senator Bail Organa, who she had worked closely with for years, ever since she became senator. It was her, Senator Bail Organa, and Mon Mothma. I can't even say that word. I don't know why. Mon Mothma. Good Lord. Had kind of performed this trio that did a lot of stuff together. And this was a pet project of Senator Bail Organa. And so she went to Alderaan for a conference there to be conducted to kind of figure out what they can do, right? While she's there, an assassination attempt is attempted on her life. Now, when she went there, of course, she went there with 3PO. 3PO went with her everywhere, but Ahsoka Tano was there. She knew Ahsoka as Anakin's Padme, but Ahsoka had gone there because there had been some rumblings that there might be an assassination attempt against her, and she had a bad feeling. But they went there, and the bounty hunter that was trying to assassinate her was, of course, the one and only Aurra Sing. Now, the first attempt, she shot Padme, injured her in the arm. Would have been successful had it not been for Ahsoka Tano, who saved her life. Now, they knew that there was going to be another attempt. They didn't know how or if she might come back because they didn't capture her when she made the first attempt. And so they came up with this scheme to try to capture Aurra, and they do. They're basically able to subdue her. They capture her, and you can see that in the Clone Wars. And then they find out it was one of the Hutts trying to get rid of her. I'm trying to remember the name of the Hutt. I think it was... I'm trying to look at my notes here. Oh, I don't have the name of it, but we know that she had been hired by one of the Hutts. So, and that kind of gets us through some of the main points. And there are other things that go on with Padme that you can kind of cover. I mean, if you want to really get into more about Padme, this is kind of stuff she does, and it's kind of a cycle of things like that. There's the mission to Batuu. Just going through some of my notes here. There's a thing where she does spying against another senator. There's another couple things where she does some other things. So there's some few incidents. There's the Blue Shadow Viral Crisis. So there's some other things you can read about. But it's kind of her doing her thing. You know, Padme just being Padme. And I don't want to cover it because we'll be here for hours if I cover every little detail that goes on with Padme and and the Clone Wars. So now all this leads to, again, the end of the Clone Wars, and this leads us to Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that one thing that I meant to mention it earlier, but I'll mention it now, is that what's cool, if you see the deleted scenes from the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, there's some really cool scenes that involve Padme. One of the scenes in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, that's deleted, you can see this, and it was in the book. Anakin actually meets Padme's sister and his mom and her mom and her dad. They have a meal together. It was kind of a really nice scene where you see Anakin seeing Padme and her family, and Padme's mom kind of looking at Anakin, oh, like he's handsome. It's kind of a cool scene, and I suggest you go check it out. It's really cool. I thought it gave her character a little bit more in depth. The other thing is the deleted scene that's in Revenge of the Sith, where you kind of see Mon Mothma. Why can't I say that? Senator Bail Organa and her. They have this talk about everything that's going on with Palpatine and things of that nature, and it's kind of the start of, quote unquote, the rebellion. So if you haven't seen those, I really suggest you check that out. But now we get to Episode 3, and if you haven't seen Revenge of the Sith, you know what happens. The war is continuing. Separatists make a move to get Palpatine. All that stuff happens. You can watch it in the movie. However, this brings Anakin back to Naboo, and you know, during the war, he only had fleeting chances to see Padme. She's out doing her thing. He's out doing his thing. Whenever they could catch a time together, they would spend it together. But you know, they spent a long distance away from each other. You know, he's a general and he's a Jedi fighting this war. She's a senator doing everything she can, and she has her duties. But when they had their time together, they made it count. And this was another opportunity. Of course, Anakin has the vision that she'll die in childbirth, and this leads to his fear. You can see it all in the movie. And then we get to her death, which has the result of the Revenge of the Sith. You can see everything that leads up to this scene where she confronts Anakin trying to save him as he's turning to the dark side, and he force chokes her, thinking that she had brought Kenobi there to kill him. And you can kind of watch this in the movie, and you know, she says her famous lines, you know, that people sometimes make a joke about, but I thought they were pretty cool. And you know, she doesn't die. But let me backtrack for a second. When Anakin sees her at the beginning of the movie, she lets him know that she's pregnant. And they start talking about plans of what to do with the children and stuff. That's what led him having the visions of her dying in childbirth. But again, we get to Mustafar, the big, great scene where Anakin and Obi-Wan had their epic lightsaber duel. But Padme was knocked out. After Kenobi, you know, of course, defeats Anakin, he saves Padme, takes her to where Senator Organa and Grandmaster Yoda are. She gives birth, but she loses her will to live, and she gives birth, and before she does, she names her children Luke and Leia. Now, after she dies, the children are hidden, so when she dies, she has a funeral on Naboo where hundreds of people march and follow this procession of her death. She was one of the most beloved queens and just one of the most beloved leaders of Naboo. And when she died, you know, you can see it in the scene. The entourage that follows her pathways, they lay her to rest. Still thinking that she's still pregnant. They kind of show that she's still pregnant. And you see that she had the little locket that Anakin had given her when she died. And really a touching scene. And when again, you really need to watch the movie and stuff. So, and that's kind of how it ends for Padme. You know, she died believing that there was still good in Anakin. She never gave up hope. She wanted to believe that there was still hope for Anakin, that he could be saved. She was madly in love with him. But, you know, she was, you know, one of the most iconic characters. And let's kind of talk about her personality and what she believed in. You know, I mean, she has her legacy is that she was not just the mother of Luke and Leia, but that she was this exceptional leader, a woman that didn't take guff. She was brave. She was courageous. You know, she was strong, but she was also sincerely compassionate and just did everything she could for those that were less fortunate and tried to make the life better for others around her. She was very charismatic. She was an exceptional speaker, and she was exceptionally good at politics. But she wasn't out for herself. She was out for others. You know, she actually took her responsibilities seriously. She wasn't in the political game to gain anything. She was in the political game to make the lives of her planet, of her people, or anybody she was dealing with better. And, you know, she would do whatever it took. She would go anywhere and do anything that was required to make that happen. So, you know, it's this. It would have been interesting to see, had she lived, what she could have accomplished. You know, she was that kind of leader. Maybe she could have become the chancellor someday. I wouldn't have doubted it, but, you know, her love of Anakin, you know, became her downfall. You know, unfortunately. So that's Padme Amidala. I think she's one of the better characters in Star Wars. And if you haven't seen the movies, please go check out the movies. If you haven't seen the Clone Wars, please check out the Clone Wars. Read any books you can about her. It's really, really great stuff that you can learn about this incredible woman in Star Wars that represents so much about the mythos and lore. So please check out Padme Amidala. I guarantee you'll love what you'll see there. And with that, we're going to end this lore video. I really appreciate your time. If you like this, leave comments one way or the other. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel. We'll keep doing this lore series as long as you guys keep watching it. And with that, thank you for coming to check out our lore video. Have a great one, and we'll see you soon.